In late 1996, a horror film was released that was initially conceived as a movie satirizing the horror genre. To the surprise of everyone, including its creators, the film became iconic. With a budget of $14 million, it grossed $170 million at the box office and won the love of audiences worldwide. This film is Scream, where a masked maniac hunts teenagers. If you haven't seen it, you've definitely heard of it. The film gained even more fame from a parody called Scary Movie, which was also destined to become a cult classic. But there's one detail that even devoted fans don't know. Scream was inspired by real events, which we will tell you about today. The connection between Scream and a real-life murder spree only became known in 1997. At that time, Kevin Williamson, the man who created the film's plot, was giving an interview. He told reporters that the idea for Scream came to him while watching a documentary about the Gainesville murders. These events, which occurred 6 years before the film's release, deeply frightened Kevin. It was night, and he was home alone, which only added to the terror. During a commercial break, he suddenly heard a noise in the house and panicked. Kevin searched the entire house and found an open window. He was so scared that he grabbed a kitchen knife and called his friend to come over. That's the effect the story of real crimes had on him. For a whole week after these events, Kevin had nightmares. It was then that he realized the story of the Gainesville Ripper could be the basis for a good horror film. Now, let's go back to 1990 to look at those events. The college town of Gainesville in sunny Florida was called a student paradise on Earth. With a population of just over 100,000, it covered an area of about 170 square kilometers. On August 20, 1990, the city was officially ranked among the top 10 most beautiful and safest places in the USA. Taking advantage of this, the Gainesville government decided to turn the place into a tourist mecca, investing hundreds of thousands of dollars in advertising Paradise on Earth. Local hotels, restaurants, and other businesses also invested a ton of money expecting a flood of tourists. What could possibly go wrong? On August 25, a police officer received a report of a murder over the radio. He was dispatched to an apartment where two 17-year-old students, Christina Powell and Sonia Larson, lived. Upon entering the apartment, the officers were sickened by what they saw. The girls were dead. An unknown maniac had done horrific things to them. Moreover, the killer had washed his victims' heads using a huge amount of shampoo. We simply cannot describe all the brutal details on YouTube because the platform would never allow it. For those interested in learning all the gruesome details, we will make a detailed post on our Telegram channel, a link to which we will leave in the description. This crime shocked the city, which just yesterday was considered one of the safest in the country. The authorities already understood that their positive reputation could come to an end. And by the next day, it became clear that a real serial killer was loose in the city. On August 26th, another police officer received a similar murder report over the radio. He was sent to an apartment where 18-year-old student Krista Hoyt lived. As soon as they crossed the threshold, he and his partner immediately knew it was the same killer. The young woman was dead, and the unknown perpetrator had done the same horrific things to her as before. Her hair was also washed with a huge amount of shampoo. As soon as the news spread through the city, students panicked. It was obvious the killer was choosing random targets, and anyone could become his victim. No one doubted he would kill again. The only question was when he would strike next. Many students living alone began to form groups. People moved in with each other to avoid being alone day or night. Bats and door locks were swept off store shelves. Local university students did everything they could to protect themselves from the unknown maniac, but not everyone succeeded. Just 2 days after the last murder, the killer broke into an apartment rented by 23-year-old Tracy Powells and her classmate Manny Taboda. The young man was almost 2 meters tall, or 6'3", and played football, but that didn't help him in a fight with a monster. The killer murdered them both, committing the same atrocities against the young woman. Thus, in just a few days, the criminal had killed 5 students. It was hard to overestimate the level of panic that gripped the town. The police were under colossal pressure. The authorities, residents, and businesses who had been spending millions of dollars just a week ago in anticipation of a tourist influx, they all demanded the swift capture of the killer. Under such pressure, the police really threw all their resources into the case and on August 30 made a loud announcement. The killer has been caught. The suspect was a student named Edward Humphrey. The young man was unstable, his face was covered in scars, and he had been arrested by the police several times before. But most importantly, shortly before the murders, he had visited all 3 apartments where the victims lived in search of cheap housing. All of this made the public believe that the police had indeed caught the right guy. Newspaper headlines screamed that the town was now safe as the dangerous monster was behind bars. And indeed, since Humphrey's arrest, there had been not a single murder in Gainesville, and residents finally breathed a sigh of relief.
A week later, on September 7th, in a town called Ocala near Gainesville, a man named Danny Rolling was arrested for armed robbery. He had tried to rob a bank, but an employee managed to discreetly press the alarm button. The first thing the police discovered was that Rolling was involved in a whole series of robberies that had swept the county in recent days. But then things got interesting. The tools seized from him during his arrest were very similar to those used by the Gainesville Ripper. Next, the police compared the Gainesville murders with Rolling's location and found he had been living in the city and left right after Humphrey's arrest. But that's not all. The police learned that in 1989, a brutal murder had occurred in the city of Shreveport. An unknown person had killed William Grissom, his 24-year-old daughter Julie, and his 8-year-old grandson Sean. The killer had posed their bodies in obscene positions and washed the young woman's head with a large amount of shampoo. And guess what? Rolling was living in Shreveport at that exact time. The police then began to seriously consider whether he was connected to all these murders. Soon, additional evidence emerged to support this theory. The police found Rolling's cache in the woods where he hid stolen money. But there was something else interesting there. Audio diaries on cassette tapes with hints about a series of murders and items that belonged to the victims of the Gainesville Ripper. All of this was already enough to charge him with the murders, but the trial dragged on for years. The killer refused to admit his guilt. Only in 1994, on the advice of his lawyer, did he make a full confession to all the murders committed in Gainesville. By then, the police had already released Edward Humphreys. He later admitted that he was still considered the killer until Rolling confessed. In court, Rolling described in detail the atrocities he committed against his victims. He refused to answer only one question: why he washed his victims' heads with shampoo. The killer stated that he would take that secret with him to hell. As for his motives, it was very simple. Seeing Gainesville being recognized as one of the safest cities and nicknamed a paradise, Rolling decided to show everyone that it wasn't true. The murders themselves simply gave him pleasure. In other words, there were no specific reasons that pushed him to kill. It was all due to a twisted and sick psyche. He also stated that he wanted to become as famous as another serial killer, Ted Bundy. Rolling's lawyer had hoped the confession would help him avoid the death penalty, but that didn't happen. In the same year, 1994, he was sentenced to death by lethal injection. As is often the case, he lived for many years before his execution and managed to stir up public opinion more than once. Danny Rolling managed to get married while in prison. His beloved was Sandra London, a journalist specializing in serial killers. She called Rolling a magnificent man and was even proud of the murders he committed. Either she had serious mental problems or it was all a cold, calculated move. After her husband's death, she published a book called The Making of a Serial Killer. Being officially married to Rolling, she could regularly visit him in prison and gather material for her book. Rolling's execution took place on October 25, 2006, 12 years after his sentencing. Taking advantage of his right to any last meal, the killer ordered lobster, shrimp, a baked potato, sweet tea, and strawberry cheesecake. As the injection was administered, he sang a church hymn and continued to do so until he lost consciousness. Shortly before his execution, he confessed to a priest to the murders of 3 people in Shreveport, which the police had never been able to prove. Thus, he had killed 8 people. His dream of being like Ted Bundy was partially fulfilled. He was executed in the very same room. Of course, this was just a coincidence. One of the reasons the execution was delayed for 12 years was the endless appeals filed by Rolling. Until the very last moment, he hoped the court would have mercy and commute his sentence to life in prison. Fortunately for all of civilized society, that did not happen. To fully understand who Rolling was, one must briefly look at his biography. As is the case with most serial killers, he grew up in a violent environment. His father constantly beat him and told him that Danny was an unwanted child. His mother and younger brother also suffered. In his youth, he joined the army but was discharged due to a mental disorder. Then Danny got married, but his wife left him. In 1990, a few months before the start of the murder spree, Rolling attempted to kill his own father, but he survived. He had a good relationship with his younger brother. Before his execution, he spent several hours with him. A priest also spoke with them. When Scream was released, Rolling was on death row awaiting his sentence. Most likely the prison administration did not allow him to watch movies, so the killer probably never saw it and did not know he had inspired the plot. But most fans of the film are unaware of this to this day. Perhaps after this video you will see Scream in a different light, although the film did not come close to the brutality with which Rolling killed.
Subscribe to the channel to listen to these real and scary stories. Sometimes these stories end well, but more often badly. It's disturbing.